How much Yahweh do you want? Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. I want to share with you a couple of thoughts around this idea of how much God, how much Yahweh, how much of his holiness, his intimacy do you really want? Now, when you first see this question, it's tempting to say, I want all I can get. I want as much as there is to get. But I would caution you to pause just for a second, because think about this. Is it possible that sometimes what we say we want may not be in alignment with what we really want? Right now, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to get in better conditioning. I'm trying to get that fitness that I've been in before, or a new self, whatever it is. So I decided to get up in the morning and start working out. My wife, who's done a few triathlons, so she's running 5 miles. I said, okay, let's do it. 4 miles. I get up and I start running with her. Now, I had a little bit of practice. I did a mile before, a couple of days, 2 or 3 days prior. And I thought, okay, maybe I can, push through it. But as you can see where the story is going, I got to mile 1. And I said, you can go on, keep on running, keep on. Now, to truth be told, I did keep running and walking. And I got to maybe 3 miles that way. She finished it nice and strong. But all I'm saying is I want to finish. I want to be in better shape. And here's the thing. I could have kept running. So it wasn't as if I stopped because I just couldn't do anymore. I gave 100%. I gave maybe 85%. And I was just so unused to it. My body was like, we're not used to this. My brain, for those who've done anything athletic for over a long period of time, it's a mental exercise. And I just wasn't willing to push myself that far. And that's what I want to talk about. How much do you really want of Yahweh? Because oftentimes what we want and what we do are not in alignment. And then to show that what we really want is not as much as what we think. Where did this idea come from? As you may or may not know, we follow the Torah portions of reading, and which is a few chapters out of the first 5 books of the Bible every Sabbath, every Saturday. And this Sabbath was Numbers 4 through Numbers 7. And one of the scriptures in that was in Numbers 6, and it talked about the Nazirite law. It says, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazirite, to separate himself to Yahweh, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. And this is a vow. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of a vow. And it's not just something that you kind of make up and you say, or you just think to yourself. This is a serious matter. In this special vow, the person would, as a Nazirite, separate himself to Yahweh. He wouldn't drink any wine or strong drink. Now, there's some other things that were included in that. But this is a passage that I want to anchor in as I explore this idea of how much Yahweh do you really want? When I did this lesson earlier, someone asked, we could reverse that question and ask, how much of us does Yahweh want? And we all know the answer. He wants all of us. As a matter of fact, he doesn't just say so. He positions himself so that he can receive all of us. At any moment, we can give our whole selves to him, and he's ready to receive. So the question is no longer how much of us does he want, and has he positioned himself to receive us, because we know that he paid the price. He gave his son, and he is constantly having a standing invitation and appointment to meet with you. It's us. The ball's in our court. He says, you can have as much of me as you want. What does that have to do with the Nazirite law? Well, let's consider this. This is speaking to the people of Israel. This is God's people. He selected them. They're his special people. So you're really not worried about, let me do this to get saved or be in his kingdom, kind of what's the minimum I got to do? No. You're already good. You're fine. This is an opportunity. This is a special vow by which a person can separate himself even further to be holy to Yahweh. Therefore, the question, how much do you want? Would you take the vow? Will you create a vow that in which you would separate yourself further from things that are completely permissible for you so that you can be a better tool and vessel through whom Yahweh can use? That's really the underlying question I have throughout this lesson. And I hope by the end of this lesson, you're excited, like I've been excited when I did this, to consider all the possibilities and all the doors and endless opportunities that we have to draw closer to him in unique ways that have never been done. The invitation is there. A vow, let's start there, is a very serious matter. It's not silent. Matter of fact, if you look and kind of do some research here, it says the versions render express, make explicit, implying that the vow cannot be silent, but must be articulated. Makes a remarkable vow. So this is, first of all, this is a serious thing. It's kind of like the whole put your Bible on the thing and this is a serious matter. You're vowing to say, this is what I'm going to do out loud. Vows are not promissory by definition, but they differ from promissorios in that they are conditional. Conditional vows means I do this, you do that. Here's some references to some vows, some conditional vows that were made. Jacob returns home safely. If I return home safely, I'll give you 10% of everything I have. So he made a vow. This is what I'm going to do. Pending you do this, and I promise I'll do that. If Israel is victorious over the Canaanites, we're going to be fully dedicated to you. I can't remember exactly how I said it. This is a sobering and sad story of Jephthah, who is granted victory over the Ammonites. He hastily made a vow saying, if we can get victory, I will sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house. And unfortunately, it was his daughter. And though in tears and crying and sadness, his daughter died. She was sacrificed for his vow, because that's how serious. And the daughter gave herself because she knew that this was a serious matter. Hannah is granted a son, who we know later to be Samuel. Absalom returns home safely. These are vows made. You can look those up more. All vows in the Bible are dedication to the sanctuary. This is something to play around with. But if you want to separate yourself even further and pursue greater intimacy with Yahweh, greater holiness in his eyes, forget what everyone else thinks. Here's a way you can do it. How much of him do you want? And I mention this because most of us will tend to say, I want maximum return with minimum investment, right? We're always looking for what's the least I can do to get the most blessing, to get the most benefit. And here's an opportunity now where you can create a vow and don't have to. The question I ask is it a sin not to make a Nazirite vow? No, you wouldn't be in sin at all. That's completely fine. But you would be in sin if you made the vow and did not keep it. And it would be more challenging because you have things you need to abstain from and restrictions that we'll talk about here. So there was a temporary vow you can make over so many days, weeks, months, years, however long you wanted to, as far as I can tell. And there was some in the scriptures who made lifelong vows. In Judges, we see Samuel, but the angel said to me, behold, Samson, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink and eat nothing unclean, for the child shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb to the day of his death. So this is an angel speaking to his mother, saying he's going to be a Nazirite for the rest of his life. Wow. First Samuel, we learn of Samuel being the prophet, a Nazirite. And she vowed a vow and said, O Yahweh of hosts, This is Hannah praying because she was barren and could not have children. If, you see that language, the conditional language that we spoke of, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to Yahweh all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Lifelong, completely all in. And then one that you may or may not know about, John the Baptist. For he would be great before Yahweh, and he must not drink wine or strong drink, and he would be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. This was a Nazirite as well, lifelong. So this comes up. Again, the question is, how much do you want? Some may say, look, I'll do 2 weeks. I'll do 6 months. You can get as much as you want to. Are you willing to go the whole way? It's not a crime if you don't. But how much Yahweh do you really want? Again, throughout this lesson, I want to challenge you to evaluate what boundary lines have you drawn around your relationship with God, of which you said, this is how far I will go, and this is how far you can come. When the whole time Yahweh has kept his arms open for you, open wide, waiting, saying you can have as much of me as you want. But maybe we're saying too often, that's enough. That's enough. That's good enough. But do you hunger and thirst for righteousness? Do you have an incessant and deep appetite for all things kingdom related and Yahweh related? That you're like, I want to do more. I want to be closer. I want to be better for you. The cool thing I'm sharing with you here is that Yahweh creates such an opportunity, as you can see. This is just one example that he created, but it gives us a window and an understanding of the person of Yahweh, if you will, that he opens it up. You can just stay the Israelite, or if you want to do more, you could do this. So what was the purpose of a Nazirite? We saw it in the scriptures, and I read it already. Here it is in Hebrew. The root Nazir means to separate oneself. And if the separation is for God, then it implies sanctification. The implication is clear. Only by separating oneself, by abstaining from certain acts permitted to all others, can one be sanctified to God. I'm going to read that again. Only by separating oneself, by abstaining from certain acts permitted to all others, can one be sanctified to God. So Yahweh created this opportunity, or accepted this vow. Why? Because you're willing to abstain from the very things that were completely appropriate for you. These were not sin. They didn't break any commandments. They were not even offensive. But you chose to take on some restrictions in light of, in preference to a closer relationship with God, in preference to being considered holy to Yahweh, in preference to being a better vessel. You said, no, I'll keep those things away. Imagine that. Everyone has the freedom to go about in whatever way. In this, and what we talked about so far, they can cut their hair. They can trim their hair. They can drink wine. And just a side note on that. We talk about drinking wine. This is not a small matter. They didn't have faucets and water like we do here. Drinking wine was a big part of their lifestyle, big part of ceremonies and rituals and just life. So to say you're not drinking wine for the rest of your life, that's like almost saying I'm not going to be drinking water like this, or whatever your preferred beverage, or whatever you eat that's normal. We're not going to ever eat bread or something like that for the next so many months or years or for life. The noun Nazir is probably an abbreviated of Nezer Elohim, which means, and I'm showing it here, you can see it in Judges, a Nazirite to God, Nezer Elohim. Now, I'm not proficient in Hebrew. Those who are, I apologize, you can correct that. But so I want to make sure I show it here. But the point is, what's the purpose? Do you want to be set aside for God in an even greater way? See, we're not even talking about the world versus the church. No, we're talking about within this own community. Yahweh has created space for individuals to say, you can have more. The question now for you is, Do you want more? How much more? This much? This much? How much more? So I'm excited to know that he offers that much. Let me take a detour here and talk about priests. Priests, and they are connected in an interesting way to the Nazirites. And I'm going to share that with you. But let me talk about the role of a priest. Priests, anyone couldn't become a priest. Priests were selected. Matter of fact, Hebrews 5 gives a great summary for the role that they played. They were like vessels and liaisons between Yahweh and his people. Verse 1 of chapter 5 of Hebrews says, "For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins." They were going to God on behalf of the people. And no matter how much you enjoyed it and thought it was cool, you couldn't just raise your hand and be like, "Hey, I've been training for this. I can be a priest." It may have been a position that was desired by many. And it may have been a position that was abhorred by many. Maybe some priests, they didn't have it wasn't a choice. You were born and that was your role, and you played that role. But this was a big role. Matter of fact, it was so big that about 3, 4, 5 chapters in Leviticus dedicated to the process that Aaron and his sons had to go through to become priests. One of the things was staying in the tent of meeting area, the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days to be ordained. And you shall not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days until the days of your ordination are complete. For it would take 7 days to ordain you. Amongst the sacrifices, amongst the anointing with their head and their garments, it's a long procession in ordination. Why am I mentioning all that? What does this have to do with a Nazirite? Well, I thought it was quite interesting, because when you start to look at the things that a Nazirite had to abstain from, it looks a lot like priests. The ordinary Israelite was given a status resembling a priest, for he too became holy to the Lord. Compare the following verses regarding holiness to Yahweh for both the priest and the Nazirite. So look at this. So for the priest shall be holy to their God and not profane the name of their God. And listen to the Nazirite. All the days of his separation, he is holy to Yahweh. So this was one of the ways a common Israelite could get the status of a priest. You're also holy to Yahweh. See, the priests had a special status with God, being those liaisons, being those vessels, and they're holy. They're set apart. They didn't have land. They ate certain foods tithe from the people, and so on and so forth. It was a special group. But the Levites are also the Nazirites could also be holy to Yahweh. But what's even more is that when you look at what they were asked to abstain from, they're actually more than just like priests, but like the high priest. They're better compared to the high priest. So if you look at the scriptures, when it comes to what happens if someone dies. So for a priest, if someone dies, here's how it's said. And Yahweh said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, no one shall make himself unclean for the dead among his people." Nobody. You can't make yourself unclean, even if someone dies. Except, so there's an exception, for his closest relatives. His mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother, or his virgin sister. So there were some exceptions a priest can make. But for the high priest, Aaron, and those in his line, he shall not go into any dead bodies, or make himself unclean, even for his father or for his mother. This is a special place as priest, and especially as high priest. Now let's look at the Nazirite. All the days that he separates himself to Yahweh, he shall not go near a dead body. Not even for his father or for his mother or brother or sister. If they die, shall he make himself unclean, because his separation to God is on his head. Wow. This was just a common Israelite who made a vow, but now abstaining from the things that used to be completely fine. We just talked about that. But because of his desire to be holy to Yahweh, he's abstaining even to the point of the high priest. And if you can argue it, maybe even further, as they include brother and sister. Also, there is an emphasis on the anointing of the head. So you look at a priest, Then you shall take part of the blood that is on the altar and the anointing oil and sprinkle on Aaron and his garments, and on his sons and his sons' garments with him. He and his garments shall be holy. But when you look at the high priest, it's not just garments, but we have an emphasis on what goes on his head. And you shall set the turban on Aaron's head and put the holy crown on the turban. You shall take the anointing oil and pour it on his head and anoint him. And a Nazirite, and he shall consecrate the Nazirite's head. So this is a big deal that we focus on what's on the Nazirite head. Matter of fact, it talks a lot about his hair as we really read into it. And once he completes his vow, the cutting of his hair, and we just read a second ago that because his separation to God is on his head. Only the high priest gets such emphasis about his head. And now the Nazirite we see is getting the same kind of attention. And also, we mentioned the differences between drinking wine. Can a priest or high priest drink wine? So I'm going to take that off, see if you can think of it. Can a high priest or priest drink wine? Well, the answer is, yeah, they can. They just aren't allowed to do so in the tent of meeting. Drink no wine or strong drink. You or your sons with you when you go into the tent of meeting. So it's the same here for both Aaron and his sons. However, it's a little bit different, isn't it, for the Nazirite? All the days of his separation, not just when he's in a tent of meeting, not just when he's in a certain place, he shall eat nothing that is produced from the grapevine. So not just wine or strong drink, nothing that comes from the grapevine, not even seeds or the skin. Wow. Why am I mentioning this? Because the question is, how much Yahweh do you want? A Nazirite would take a vow that would cause him to abstain from the things that even the high priest didn't have to abstain from. However, the benefit was being able to draw closer to God, was being able to be holy to God, set aside for his purpose in a greater way. How much do you want? And lastly, we talked about the hair. Was it okay for a priest to cut their hair? We learn from Ezekiel 44:20 that the priests shall not shave their heads or let their locks grow long. They shall surely trim the hair of their heads. So they couldn't let their hair grow long. They had to trim it. That was the directive. However, for a Nazirite, all the days of his vow separation, no razor shall even touch his head until the time completed for which he separates himself to Yahweh. He shall be holy. He shall let the locks of his hair and of his head grow long. So this even exceeds that of a high priest. Would you have made this vow? Now, keeping in mind, if you broke this vow, not even on purpose, if someone died next to you and you happened to be in a house or accident, you would have to sacrifice, cut your hair, and start your vow over because your vow was not complete. This is a big deal. But the benefit is you get to draw closer to Yahweh. You get to be holy to Yahweh. How much do you want? Do you want it that badly? Now, I'm not asking, in case you're thinking, that you need to do a Nazirite vow. Matter of fact, it'd be really difficult to do without a temple and all the sacrifices, but you could do as much as you can. That's the cool point that I'm trying to make here. But will you go out of your way? Will you really do the work to say, I want Yahweh, so I'll do more? Now, if that wasn't enough, you could actually go beyond the Nazirite vow. In verse 21 of chapter 6, it says, this is the law of the Nazirite. This is at the end of that chapter, or at least that section about the Nazirite law, Nazirite vow. But if he vows an offering to Yahweh above his Nazirite vow, so you're already, let's say, saved, you're already with God, you don't have to take this, but there is a group who would take it and say, yes, I want this, I want to draw closer. And there's another group who would be so excited about being holy to Yahweh that they will go above this vow. So they're talking about in this situation what to do. So, but if he vows an offering to Yahweh above his Nazirite vow, as he can afford in exact accordance with the vow that he takes, then he shall do in addition to the law of the Nazirite. So you had to do the Nazirite law exactly as prescribed. However, you could add on to it if you wanted to. Who would do that? Who would add on to that? It's already higher than the priest and the high priest in many ways. You want to add more to it? What do you add? The cool thing is whatever you want. If that's where your heart is, if that's how much more you want to show Yahweh that you're all in and you're sold out and you want to be holy to him, a great clean vessel through which he can use, you can have it. The question again is, how much do you want? How much are you going after? How much are you setting aside that says, I'm going to abstain. This is completely permissible, but I'm going to put that aside to devote myself to Yahweh. You know that in Yahweh's kingdom, that there is space for least and greatest. So you get to choose. Which one do you want? You want to be the least or you want to be among the greatest? I have yet to have a hand go up to say, I want to be in the least of his kingdom. If it's Yahweh's kingdom, if it's God's kingdom, this is not some man's company. I want to be in his kingdom, the greatest. Right? So in verse 5, chapter 5 of Matthew chapter 5:19, it says, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I ask you again, do you want to be least in the kingdom or great in the kingdom? There are some who are relaxing some of the commandments and teaching others to do the same, according to this verse that Yeshua was speaking. But they will be in the kingdom. They just won't be among the greatest. It's going to be a surprise, maybe. It's like they're not teaching that right. They're saying it's not a big deal for that law. But according to this, it says you're relaxing that command. That's not good. You're going to be in the kingdom, but there's a place for least and there's a place for greatest. If you want to be in an eternal kingdom, wouldn't it be preferable to be in the greatest position? He says, I'll show you how. The Nazarite vow was one of those ways that opens up the idea that we could seek him in a special way, in a unique way. We can go outside the explicit laws of Yahweh and do something different. Or will you be one to just say, I'm going to do the minimum. I'm going to do exactly what's told me, nothing more, nothing less. No problem. There is a place for you. In Luke 9:46-48, after reading this, I'm convinced that one of the reasons that Yeshua chose the 12 disciples is because they desired to be great. He wants men and women, people in his kingdom who want greatness, not just enough to get by. So he leaves the door open for you and me to say, you can get up early as you want. You can pray as much as you want. You can fast as much as you want. You can vow what you want. All these things will be credited to you. But the question is, how much do you want? In verse 46, these men wanted greatness, and we can see it because they argued over it. In an argument arose among them as to which of them was the greatest. But Yeshua, Jesus, knowing the reason of their hearts, took a child and put him by his side and said to them, whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you all, is the one who is great. They were arguing over who was great. I always try to imagine what that must have sounded like, right? You know, I hear sometimes sports fans argue over the greatest of all time, the GOAT, and this is why. But what did it sound like? What is Peter saying? No, you see how many fish I caught because I prayed that well? You remember that? And then Bartholomew is like, yeah, that is a good point. He does have favor. You see how Yeshua was leaning on him and talk. I don't know how that went, but they desired greatness. And you know, one of the things I love about this passage that Yeshua doesn't do? Yeah, it's one of the things that he doesn't do that gets me excited. What he does not do here is he does not correct them about their desire to be great. As a believer, sometimes we spend a lot of time trying to be humble or being humble, hopefully. And we don't want to say or don't want to pursue anything that looks big and, great. But the truth is, he doesn't correct them on desiring to be great. Matter of fact, like I said earlier, I think he wanted men with ambitions to be great, hungry, desired They had visions and dreams. They weren't okay with just being here amongst everyone else. I want to be at his side, as we saw later. I think a mother brought her son. I want to be at his side. I want to be your right hand. Yes, hunger for it. You know what he did do? He taught them the proper way to be great. See, we're getting an idea just by starting looking at the Nazarene vow that there is a way to add another layer, another level to intimacy, holiness with God. And a lot of these ways we already know. There's no secrets. We already know it. The question is when rubber hits the road. When when I'm on mile 1 and I start feeling my legs. I was running with my wife and she wanted to do the 4 miles. I stopped at 1. It was hurting too much. I could have given more, but it was hurting. And I had to ask myself that question that we always ask when things get really tough. Why am I doing this? Do I really want it? So there's things that I want, but I don't want it that much. How much do you want? Because you can have all of me, Yahweh tells you. You can have as much as you want. But soberly, we desire other things. We desire to fill our minds, our bellies, our time, our spaces with things that are not Yahweh. And some of these things aren't necessarily sinful. It's just that we rather choose those than him. And we say, that's enough. This is how far I'm coming, and this is how far you can go. That's the boundary. But in essence, Yahweh has what I'm calling just because things you can do. Just because you want. Outside of being explicitly told and commanded the top 10 commandments and this, there's things you can do just because. We see that in Leviticus 23, as we read in the first verse, there's things that you have to do. He's calling you to do this. But in verse 38, it's on your own volition. Verse 37, these are the appointed feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim as times of holy convocation, for presenting to Yahweh food offerings, burnt offerings, and grain offerings, sacrifices, and drink offerings, each on its proper day. This was a command. These are Yahweh's appointed feasts. He's appointed. This is not optional. You need to do these. Present his food offerings, the burnt offering, the grain offering. These are the things that were being asked. This is not optional. And then we see in verse 38, besides Yahweh's Sabbaths and besides your gifts, this is a gift. It probably wouldn't be a good gift. It was commanded. It's a gift. You get to give a gift to Yahweh. That means you get to package it and put in there what you want to. Wasn't that cool? It's open. You can put $1 or 10. You can put your new toy, your old toy. You can put your biggest or small, whatever you want. The question is, how much do you want? How much are you willing to give? How much are you willing to sacrifice? Your vow offerings, all your vow, you can make a vow. What vow do you want to make? Right? There's no prescription other than saying, if this, then this, I'll do this. You can open it up. How far do you want to go? But just know it's a serious vow. You need to hold to it. And this is where rubber hits the road. This is where things get really serious and we start thinking, okay, hold on. I do want Yahweh, but the price is higher than I expected. The cost benefit analysis, right? There's a benefit here, but I'm starting to feel like the cost is too great for the benefit that I'm getting. I don't know if that's necessary, and it's not, but it's an option. Your free will offerings are called free will for a reason. It's a free will. I just want to give. So if this is not your heart, you may have been thinking, let me just do the minimum. I'm just going to show up to church. I'm going to greet everybody. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to pray. And I'm just trying to make it. And if you're faithful to that and God is pleased, then amen. But there I challenge you and say, hasn't God been so good that you're so grateful that you want to think about ways that you can give? Sometimes it's embarrassing to think about how we would, if we're a student, we would fumble over ourselves to do extra credit, to get bonus work, to want our teachers to look at us as a special student. The things that we do. So I'm a 10-year educator, and I've seen it. I seen one girl who took a test and got a 98. I offered her an opportunity, and not the whole class an opportunity to correct things for more work. She came in so she can get a 99 and did more work. Didn't have to. You're 98. If you ever had a job, then someone said overtime and they told you how much that overtime was going to pay. The time and a half or double. This is overtime. You don't have to do it. How many of us would jump for that? How many times have we learned a new skill or taken on a new certification at our jobs or companies or different workplaces and whatever we're doing? We become very highly motivated and highly skilled and well versed in a different company, but not so much in his kingdom. That's not good. When we pull back our hearts and our time and our money on those areas, but when it comes to other areas, when it comes to Yahweh, we can't seem to find that extra umph, and he deserves it more. Exodus 25:1-2. This is probably the first time we hear this idea of free will offering when he's asking for his sanctuary to be built. You know what he wants? He only wanted the gifts and the items from people whose heart moved them. Yahweh said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel that they take for me a contribution from every man, not just any man, not just any person, but the one whose heart moves him. You shall receive the contribution from me." Yahweh doesn't need your stuff. He doesn't need my stuff. He doesn't need my money. But you know what he does want? He wants a free will. He wants to know what you want, how much you want to give. Right? Is it more blessed to give than receive? Do you really believe that? Do you really want it? There's a blessing for you, but how much do you want? How much are you willing to give? Free will. I want somebody else to see it. Now the reward will be in them seeing it and not Yahweh. 5%, 10%, 20%, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It can go on and on about how I'm giving to him. But know Yahweh's heart has left it open. Yes, there's some explicit, clear rules and commands, statutes, testimonies, so on and so forth. But also he leaves it open for us. So if you don't have to do something, will you still do it? Do you still do it? Or are you doing the minimum? Or are you doing the same thing you've been doing year after year, month after month? Or are you looking for the edges of how you can push the envelope and say, I want more? Some of us who are in relationships, girlfriend, boyfriend, engaged, married, especially if you're married, we know that feeling, right? You met that special someone, you're excited, you're trying to find ways, you're considering how you can encourage them. You're thinking of things that no one has thought of maybe, or you're researching, you're looking up, you're coming up with this stuff. There's no rule to this. And that's what we do when we love someone. That's what we do when we're grateful. That's what we do when we're excited. We don't put boundaries around it and say that's enough. We come up with things. We keep looking and searching out. Find out, as Paul says in one of the scriptures, find out what pleases Yahweh. I'm trying to figure out what makes him happy. And us looking for how we can become more holy to him, we know is going to make him happy. And in mentioning that, here's some honorable mentions that to make that point. That there are some men and there are some people in the Bible who by name have won the heart of Yahweh. Of all the millions of people who Yahweh has made and seen come in and out of this earth, we can get into a special place. In Jeremiah 15:1, he says something like this. Then Yahweh said to me, though Moses and Samuel stood before me, yet my heart would not turn toward this people. Wow. Okay, I know there's a context here that he's upset, but look at the people he mentioned by name. He says, even these guys. What does that say about how Yahweh views Moses and Samuel? Can you imagine if your name was in there? Put your name in there. Though whoever, right, Brandon and Elizabeth and whatever your name, even if they were here, I wouldn't. What does that say? It says that these men are considered great in the eyes of Yahweh because they've separated themselves in some way and become holy to him and special. If we take a brief look at Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth. He didn't have to do that. He could have been fine and saved and all these things that some of us we can say to ourselves to just do the bare minimum and get by. No, the scriptures say he was more meek than anyone else in the earth. Wow. Samuel, his mom vowed a vow for him to be a Nazirite for life. For life. We just looked at some of the things that were prohibited. So a lot of the things that all other men and women could partake of, cutting their hair, drinking, grapes, raisins, someone dying around them, Samuel could not participate. But every time he couldn't participate, it was a reminder that he had made a pledge, or rather his mom had made a pledge that he continued to keep, all because of his desire to be holy to Yahweh. How much do you want? Are you willing to go through such sacrifices, such difficulties and abstinence in order to be that closer to Yahweh? In order to get honorable mention is what I'm calling. You get your name in there. Even Moses and Samuel, I wouldn't do it. And the word of Yahweh came to me, Son of man, when a land sins against me by acting faithlessly, and I stretch out my hand against it and break its supply of bread and send famine upon it and cut off from it man and beast, even if these three men, here we go, by name, Noah, Daniel, and Job. See, he didn't just say righteous men. He didn't say good people. He didn't say prophets or apostles. And he named them Noah, Daniel, Job. He says, even if these guys were in it, they would deliver but their own lives by their righteousness, declares Yahweh God. So he says their righteousness could deliver them. Yahweh's saying this about them. What if your name was in there? He says, even if these three people, what was so special about them? Well, we all know them. Noah, Yahweh said to Noah, go in the ark, and you and your household. Why? For I've seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Could your name be there? That he sees you in a generation. He sees you among your workplace, your school. He sees you in this world, in this city, in this community. And he says, I see you. I know nobody else sees you, but I see you. That you are righteous before me. And you can put your name there by name. Daniel, I love his story. Daniel is before the king and had the opportunity to eat the king's food. Wonderful. I mean, can you imagine how nice during this time to eat the best foods? He could have eaten it. There was nothing wrong. He could have drank. But let's see what he does. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food. He resolved in himself to do this, or with the wine that he drank. Again, what's happening? He chose a higher road that he didn't have to do. And here's what the blessing that came from it. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. He decided to separate himself. See, it's not a Nazareth vow in itself. The idea is that he wants more. I don't want to just be doing the basics. Well, what can I get away with, right? I can do this. This is fine. This is acceptable. This is acceptable. It's not about what's acceptable. It's about how much more can I be accepted? And Yahweh says you can separate yourself in different ways like this. You can come up with ways and say, no, for you, Yahweh, I'm going to do this. Job. Yahweh said to Satan, from where have you come, Satan? Satan answered Yahweh and said, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down. And Yahweh said to Satan, have you considered? What if Yahweh would say that about you? Have you considered my servant, Job? Have you considered my servant, Sarah? Have you considered my servant, Elizabeth? Have you considered my servant, John? Put your name there. Wouldn't that be cool if of all the things that's going on in the world, he's going back and forth and Yahweh says, I got someone here. I can name him. I can name her. Have you considered my servant, Job? There is none like him on the earth. Yahweh should know. He sees the whole earth and everyone in it. How do you get to such a place? But more importantly, do you desire to be in such a place that is so unique and special to your God? Or are you satisfied and say, no, this is good enough. I want to be just like everybody else and kind of blend in and just be least in the kingdom and make it. And he says, there's a place. There's a place for you. You can be obedient and faithful And many people are there, and I dare say most are. And that's what made these three and these ones and twos, these individuals, so unique. He says a blameless and upright man. Yahweh says he's blameless. Now we know he wasn't perfect, but Yahweh could say he's blameless and upright, who fears God and turns away from evil. See, when you abstain from the temptations of this world, when you go even further and abstain for things that are completely permissible, but do so to be holy to Yahweh, Yahweh sees that. Do you want to be seen by Yahweh like this? David is known to be a man after God's heart. That's cool. That's special label. The Roman centurion, Yeshua, says, when Yeshua heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. No one? Yeshua? No one in Israel? That's like going to a church meeting that Yeshua's there and some guy who had never been there, a Roman centurion, likely didn't really worship and know God and whatever, likely, we don't know. But it's like him coming in and Yeshua looking past all the congregants and people there and saying, this guy here, I've never seen anyone like that. And it's almost a slap in the face to everyone else in Israel who's like, what? You've seen us, the disciples there? I've never seen anyone with faith like this. But the Roman centurion gets identified. John the Baptist. Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist. What a distinction. Yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Do you want such a distinction? If you answer the question yes, that you want to be great in his kingdom, there's something in the words that I've just mentioned here as we look at these honorable mentions that should get you excited. You should think that I too can be in that number. I too can be in that hall of faith. I too can be among those three that he says, if even these. I'm going to close with this last couple slides where a woman comes pouring an ointment on the body of Yeshua. It says, in pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Wow. See, as believers, we push away from being in front. We push away from being on top, from being lifted up. But when Yeshua himself, when Yahweh himself says, we're going to remember you, wherever this is told, we're going to remember. Do you want to be in that? Would you like that to be you? And I know a part of you is kind of like, I shouldn't want that, but it's okay. He says it's okay to want greatness in my kingdom. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't okay, he shouldn't be saying stuff like this. But he does. And Yahweh does. He wants to see his brothers and sisters. Yahweh wants to see his servants, his children, to be desiring and hungering for righteousness, hungering for greatness, looking for ways to separate themselves. Not to necessarily be better than anyone else, but simply because they love Yahweh so much. And in doing so, in pursuing him, in their hunger and thirst for righteousness, they inadvertently separate themselves, kind of like Moses' face shining. It was something that happened. Speaking of Moses, Moses, one of the things that Moses asked that always gets me going, I think it was chapter 34 of Exodus. Maybe 32 or 34, I can't remember. But he asked God to show me your glory. Like, how do you, in the middle of a conversation, almost out of nowhere, he says, show me your glory. Like, I'm thinking to myself, where did you get this idea? Show me your glory. And the thing is, Moses just wanted to see it. And you know what the crazy part is? Yahweh says, all right. Wow. Isn't that crazy? So he desired something. He wanted something greater. He wanted an intimate place. He wanted to go further. He wanted more from Yahweh in his relationship. Show me your glory. And Yahweh says, okay. It makes me wonder how many things am I missing out on? How many things have you missed or are you missing out on in your relationship with God, in His holiness and His intimacy, simply because we haven't asked? Simply because we haven't even thought to ask. Simply because we're too afraid to ask. Simply because we're not willing to pay the cost of that ask. We know how much it's going to cost us. I'm going to have to go there. I'm going to have to sacrifice this. I wonder how much of God we're missing out. You too can have a special relationship with God like no other. If you want to be lumped in with the rest of the sheep, that's your decision. But God says, I've opened it up so that anyone could go further with me if you want, by name. He knows us all by name, the number of hairs on our head and such. But how much Yahweh do you want? For He wants you. How much do you want? Because that door is so open and the opportunities are endless for how we can reach out to Him and sacrifice and refrain from this and that just to pursue Him. I also want to caution us against judging against our brothers and sisters who seem to practice in ways that we don't like, we don't get and understand, because now we see that Yahweh leaves that door open. He says you can add to this vow. He didn't say what. Someone may decide to say, I want to wear 2 pairs of socks that are brown and blue every day for whatever reason. That's between them and Yahweh, their husband, their heavenly Father. Who am I to judge them? As Paul says, I think in Romans 14. Who am I? Let them do what they do. I'm sure Yahweh's pleased if they're doing it with the right heart and they have their own things set up with Him. Just like hopefully you do and I do as well. But we should be careful of that. So I want to finish where we started. Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman, see, men and women were taking this vow. Makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazirite, to separate himself to Yahweh. He shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. And we saw there's other things involved as well. Separate yourself. So separate yourself from the people of the world. Separate from their practices. Crucify the flesh. Do all those things. But this is going beyond that. It's going over and beyond that. You don't even have to do this. You don't. None of this you have to do. But this is good news for those of us who do hunger and do want more. You're probably already doing things. Getting up early, praying, reading more, fasting, making a vow, serving in different ways. The list goes on. You can come up with things, but you can say, I want more, Yahweh. I want to be more for you because I love you and I'm grateful. How much, Yahweh, do you want now? Let your actions show it, not just your mouth. I really want Yahweh. I want everything. Do you really? You know, there's a song that's called Yes by Shekinah Glory, I believe. And one of the verses says, if I told you what I really needed, would you still say yes? The words always get me every time. Because we tend to do things that we want to do and we think He wants. And He explicitly tells us to do. But the question is, if God told us what He really needed, would we still say yes? And the challenge with that question is we don't know what type of sacrifices, what type of difficulties are going to come with that yes. We don't know what kind of friends we're going to lose. We don't know what kind of physical ailments may happen. We don't know if we're going to lose our job, have to move. We don't know what that yes means. All we know is that this is what Yahweh wants. And that should be good enough for us. I just want what you want, Yahweh. I just want what you want, Father. You've done so much for me. He always leaves room for His people to further separate themselves for the work of His service. There's always room. The question is, how much room will you make for Him? And how much of Him do you want? I pray that this lesson and these teachings has been a blessing for you. And it challenges and inspires you. It gets you excited about ushering and drawing nearer to Yahweh in a way that you've never had before. Being excited about discovering something new about yourself and Yahweh since that door has been open. Yahweh bless you and keep you, and bless those who are hearing this word. Thank you, guys.